Good evening, one and all, and welcome back, Ed.
Good evening. Thank you, John.
How are you, man?
Yeah, no, I'm good. A nice break. Get out of the UK for a bit. And yeah, it's really nice. Just recharged the batteries. Didn't go anywhere sunny, but didn't need to be.
Cool. Right, okay, we're going to have a chat tonight. How is the chat room? Haven't seen you for a wee while. In fact, I think the last time we were on was actually Johnny Vedmore last, what would you call it, last Friday? Because since then I have torn the studio apart and reassembled it. As you can see, the background has changed.
Looks good. It's all
Cheers.
very purple.
Yeah.
Cheers.
Yeah. Purple's the colour. And I've got my little line of flags. Do you see all my flags along the back? See all those flags? There shouldn't be any, there's no offensive flags in there. So we should be all right.
Well, that's unlike you, not being offensive or not trying to offend.
My God, he's been away for 2 weeks, and the first thing out of his mouth is an insult. Good grief!
What's hardly an
Cheers.
hardly classes an insult. Cheers.
Right. How's the audio, people in the chat room? And who do we have? Nectaridas, Dreadeye, and Julie, as always. Good to see you guys. Beats and tapes. Who else we got? Ray. Hi, Ray. Hi. Melted Mushroom. Out. Don't say Shalini. Don't say Shalini at all.
Well, she said she was coming. She'll probably be along in a bit.
Yeah, either that, she's fallen asleep. You know what she's like.
Yeah.
Right, stop talking on the stupid. Nope, Robin, how you doing? 5x5. So is Robin. Thank you. And confirmed by Ray. Sound okay here, says Nectaridas. Right, great. That's fantastic. I turned my audios down slightly because I think I'm sitting slightly closer to the mic than I was before. And I don't want to get right in your ears, just in case, you know. I can't even see my camera now because I've got an auto cue.
What do you need a fucking auto cue for?
Excuse me, don't you know? This is a professional organisation here. Right, I've got an auto cue for when I record videos because I'm actually writing scripts now.
Oh wow!
So I'm
getting all professional.
I've got one in production at the moment called Working Title Hollywood. So that will be out soon. So yeah. So the auto cue should be quite good, and I tested it out today, and it works fine. And it wasn't that dear, you know. It was one of these ones that uses an iPad, but it's a hefty bit of kit. You know, it's got a big lump of metal that you screw your camera to, and then it's got the screen which sits at an angle, and it's pretty damn good. When it's on, you can't see the camera at all. In fact, the camera's shooting through it just now, and it seems to be doing okay. I think I'm in focus. Yeah, I think I'm in focus.
That's definitely a good idea for when you're recording videos.
Yeah. So, what we're going to talk about tonight, because we didn't have anything really prepared. Well, we've got a lot of stuff in the works, actually, because I've been doing a lot of stuff on AI and listening to quite a lot of different viewpoints on AI from various different guys. So I think we'll probably do something on AI again, because I believe we've done AI before. And you've been looking into the moon, haven't you?
Yes, we've got a very interesting show coming up about the moon and just how little sense it makes, even to scientists. I mean, even the standard explanation for how the moon came to exist, it still doesn't cover all of the evidence.
Yeah, it doesn't stack up.
Absolutely, and so there's various things. composition of the moon, the distance of the moon, the impact of the moon on the Earth, and the role of the moon in the actual formation of life on Earth as well. Because if the moon didn't exist, the planet would look very, very different. So and thank you to Nectaridis for the fascinating book that he got me for my birthday,
cool.
which is what the show is going to be based on. I just haven't had a chance to finish the bloody thing yet.
Yeah, well, that's fine. So that's something to look forward to. That's excellent. But I think tonight we're going to talk about, and I've noticed this over the last couple of years, it seems to be getting worse. There seems to be more and more people that, instead of being skeptical, seem to be more and more inclined to believe everything they're told without checking it or without doing any research into it, or, it just seems a bit weird because now, and we will get some pushback on this, but one of the ones that everybody seems to think that all our clouds are now caused by cloud seeding and chemtrails, despite the fact that we're in a maritime climate and it rains, and you don't get a green and pleasant land without rain, right? So you've got to have a fair amount of rainfall to look like this. The countries that do have green and pleasant lands tend to have a lot of rainfall. And it's always been that kind of way, right? So, like, for instance, you go to southwest France in the summer and everything's brown because the grass all dies off because it gets so hot and it doesn't rain. Whereas England's always near enough green, except when the haze, coming into it's only ready for harvesting. Scotland's green all the time because
flying to Zambia to see my dad.
Yeah.
And we used to go. We didn't go every winter, but we used to go in the summer. And our summer is there because it's near the equator, so they don't really have seasons. They have a hot season, a dry season, and a wet season, pretty much.
Yeah.
And for us, what's our summer is kind of what passes for winter in Zambia. And when you fly in June or July, it's all brown. Everything, literally everything you can see.
Yeah.
But if you fly in November or December, it's all green.
Yeah. And the thing is, I've no doubt that cloud seeding goes on. Although, if you look at the British government's website, they say that they haven't cloud seeded in the last 10 years, right? And to be fair,
trust those assholes?
Well, right, okay, but frankly, yes and no. Okay, because first of all, most of the people that work in government are normal people, right? They're you and I. I mean, I've worked in government. I've worked in local government. I worked in local government for 9 years. So it's not something that I don't think people are going out their way to hide anything, because I really don't think there's anything to hide. I don't think there's any need to cloud seed in the UK. I think what happens is occasionally we get, all our weather comes from the Atlantic anyway, right? And you can see it coming. You know when it's going to be cloudy because all you need to do is go and look at a satellite picture and you can see it's going to be cloudy. And the way, your local topography will determine what your area is like. Because I used to stay in Ayr, and Ayer's got an island 20 miles off the west coast called Arran. And Arran's got a mountain on it. And what Arran does is it takes the initial dump of water out of the clouds, which then scud across the top of Ayr and then dump it further up, like Glasgow and further into the country. So Ayr has this kind of, what they call it the Scottish Riviera, because it's a lot drier than the towns around it. A lot. And when I say a lot drier, I mean, you can live up the, 20 miles up the road in Ardrossan and it rains all the bloody time. You live in Ayr and it only rains half the time it does in Ardrossan. And that's only 20 miles. So your local topography has a big deal to do with what happens. I I really don't think people are cloud seeding, because how many people need to be involved in saying this isn't happening? You know, I mean, all the ground crews, all the planes that are meant to be doing it, who's supplying all the equipment? You know,
Let me just clear something up. Are we talking about cloud seeding or chemtrails?
Well, we're talking about chemtrails.
Let me just clear something up. Are we talking about?
We're talking about chemtrails, aren't we?
Well,
right?
No, there's a big. No.
Okay, what's the difference?
This is one of the issues that I've. Well, this is one of the issues that I've got. Is everyone is lumping everything together? It's all chemtrails or it's all HARP. That's not taking into account at least 100 years worth of weather modification patterns, some of which have been proven to be useless, but whilst others haven't.
Right.
Now, the chemtrails, I've been seeing them since the late 90s. I remember them first showing up. Then that's not, and I don't think it's cloud seeding. I think it's. So,
what do you think chemtrails are? This is
solar radiation management.
Right. So this is the part.
Management. That's the stated.
When did they start using it?
Based on my own observations, mid to late 90s.
So what about the contrails that you see before that?
But look, no, contrails are different. To start with, contrails don't persist and spread out across the sky.
Hold on.
I know John, don't gaslight me. I know the difference between a fucking contrail and a chemtrail. Okay, I'm like 51 years old. I've been seeing this.
So who's doing the chemtrails
in the sky?
Who's doing the chemtrails? What planes?
I don't know who's doing it.
Right. See,
I don't know why they're doing it.
Right. This is the part.
But I know it's happening.
Right.
Look, you can't tell me that that the evidence of my own eyes, what I can see, is that I'm not seeing it.
What is the chemtrail? How's it being applied?
Well, there's something obviously coming out the back of a plane, nozzles, tanks on the plane, whatever.
So
they go off at strange angles to passenger planes. Some of them are a lot faster than you'd expect a passenger plane to be. And the simple fact of the matter is that I've been seeing contrails since I was a kid. Okay, and they're relatively short.
Mm-hmm.
They don't last very long, and they stream out the back of the plane, and that's water vapor.
Well,
and then there's other ones that's clearly a spray, and it lays down a trail, and then over time you see that trail spread out, and then you get more of them.
Do you think it's to do with height?
No.
Right. So
no, I don't.
Why do I never see chemtrails here? Never.
Why do you never see chemtrails in Scotland?
No, I'm not saying Scotland, but I never see them here, right? And on the West Coast, I never see them. I've seen contrails, right? I've seen contrails, but I've never seen chemtrails.
If you're defining as a contrail and a chemtrail, then you're just playing linguistic.
I haven't defined anything.
Freaking pointless exercise.
I haven't defined anything, Ed. Right? Okay, I've seen contrails. I've seen contrails in France. I've seen planes flying over so high that you can almost not see them, and you see a contrail coming out behind them, and usually, and I'll be honest, it's gone within 30 seconds, right? But these planes are really high in a really dry atmosphere. Okay, so, but the question is, I'm slap bang next to an international airport. I'm right under the flight path that takes planes across to, across the North Atlantic to America. I never see chemtrails here. I never see contrails that then spread out and cover.
Egypt. Well, yeah. I don't see them when I go to Egypt either. I see them in Holland. Have seen them in Holland loads. I see them here loads.
I never saw them in France. At
the end of the day, it's the whole notion that it's water vapor that is laying down a trail across the sky and then sticking there, and you can see it spreading out. It is not water vapor. It's not water vapor.
So who's doing it?
Well, that's a good question.
Who's I don't have the answer. Who's doing it? And who's hiding? Well, everybody.
Oh, who's paying for it? Probably people like Bill Gates.
But then again, how many people are hiding this secret? Because nobody's coming forward to
How many
say,
people hid the Manhattan Project?
yeah,
Compartmentalization. Look, at least half, if not more, of the people
right,
who'd be
okay,
involved in a project like that wouldn't even know what the hell they were doing. They would be told it was scientific experiments, or they'd be told some
but
whatever.
these aren't special flights. I mean, these chemtrails are coming from what looks like passenger jets, and they're recorded as passenger jets, and they're scheduled
Not
flights.
always. They're not always
When
recorded
you
as
look at
passenger
flight
jets.
radar, most of these flights are regular scheduled passenger flights.
Yeah, but if you say you've never seen any contrails or chemtrails, then looking at flights that are in the area is pointless.
Well,
When I see them
I'm
moving
not
at
necessarily.
strange angles, look, I live near Gatwick,
Yeah,
and we're not that far from Heathrow
yeah,
either, because we get a lot of overflights of
uh-huh,
planes,
yeah.
and some of them
Right,
don't do anything at
okay,
all.
okay. Here, right,
Others leave
raise,
trails and
right.
move
So,
in at angles and speeds that I don't see passenger planes moving at. And frankly, the speed that some of them move would
well, how
probably be
fast?
rather uncomfortable for passengers. I
How,
don't know. That's like asking how long's a piece of string.
well, no,
Let's
right,
say
okay, but
double
you're
what
you're
I.
giving me information,
But
right?
put it this way: significantly faster by my perception than all of the other planes that I see in the
Right,
sky,
okay. So,
and
but
also at
you don't
sharper
know how high
angles.
they are, do you?
No,
So the difference is the higher up they are, the slower they look like they're going. Height makes a massive
no. But I'm
difference.
talking about plane. No, yeah, but I'm also talking about some of them ascending at angles which passenger planes just don't, because it's too sharp, and they go up very quickly. I don't know exactly how fast. All I'm saying is that I see stuff out of the ordinary. This is
Right.
why I spotted. This
Okay.
is how
Okay.
chemtrails
Hey,
originally stuck in my
I'm
brain.
I'm not questioning what you see. What I'm questioning is who's doing it, how, and why, right? And Ray comes up with it's in the fuel, right? Now putting something in the fuel would cut an incredible amount of people out of the loop, right? Because nobody would be questioning it because you would just be fueling the plane. Okay. Yeah, agreed.
Mhm.
But the problem is if it's in the fuel, why do they seem to start and stop?
Well, that yes, and I've seen. Well, I haven't seen those. I've seen videos of them,
Yeah. Yeah.
but that that's switching something on and off, because you've seen them start and stop when they're in the same layer of atmosphere, and theoretically the water vapor levels are the same. So if it was actually a contrail, you wouldn't see it stop and start. So
Well,
those little short contrails that come out the back of the plane, you don't see those. You
mm,
basically, the plane's either got one because of the altitude, or it doesn't,
right,
but you
okay.
don't see
But
it running for a bit and then stopping.
but what if you were going through an area of clear air turbulence, right? You wouldn't be able to tell that from the ground. But would that affect
True.
what was coming out the back of the plane? I don't know. I'm asking the questions here, right? And the thing is, everybody seems to. I mean, if we go back to the actual proposition that I came up with, and the fact is, everybody seems to think that every cloud in the country is now caused by chemtrails, right?
Well,
Not
I
contrails.
don't,
No, I know you
I
don't,
don't
right?
subscribe to that at all. I mean, I
But
know people do, but
you go on
yeah,
Twitter and what's it like? It's like it's inundated with people going on about the sky bastards have been up again and made everything grey. You know, nothing. I can't see the sun. I haven't seen the sun for a week. Well, that's part of living in Britain. It really is. You know, and
yeah,
and the
but
problem,
at the
the
same,
problem that people have is they forget so quickly as to what things are actually like. You know, I mean, like
but it's
right,
also the
people
same
have
category of people who blame the Freemasons for everything.
well,
There is
yes,
a.
yes, it
I
probably
mean, it
is.
goes back to what you said at the start. There is a personality type which thinks, I don't know, maybe it's easier to lump everything under one umbrella, because life is much more complicated than that, and maybe it's a
Mhm.
way of simplifying things or whatever. But yeah, I mean, you'll find people that think that everything is down to Jesuits, Freemasons, whoever, Illuminati.
Hmm.
I
Yeah.
mean, it's or that every weird bit of weather is
Well,
manipulated.
look at the hurricanes that have come across, right? Florida over the last week or so. So we've had two. And of course, the first thing, I mean, you follow Ben Davidson, and I think you agree with him most. And he's really getting into these guys because
It's,
because
he's
he,
got a proper bug up his ass about
yeah,
harp.
but let's forget harp, right? Who the hell's using harp? I mean, it's been
Well,
decommissioned. It's been handed over to a university, right? Do you really think that they are routinely heating the ionosphere to do what? And this is
Well,
right.
according to Davidson, when they experimented, it had so little effect that they shut the
Yeah,
whole thing down.
right.
That's basically his argument. But then you have people like Dutch Sins, who does some brilliant earthquake prediction stuff,
Hmm.
and he talks about NextRad, which is next generation radar,
Okay.
and he shows videos theoretically of these NextRad systems powering up,
Hmm.
and having enough electromagnetic energy to be able to influence weather systems. Now, I'm not
See,
saying it's happening,
right. So
but that's what people say.
my big problem with weather manipulation is that the weather system is so chaotic, right? That how how do you determine what effect, if any, you're going to have, and how do you determine where that effect is going to be? And that to me is a massive problem because you know I don't think the weather system bends to anyone's rules. I mean, look at that hurricane. It was a Category 5 last night, and it's a Cat 1 now. Before it had
But
landfall, it just
yes,
collapsed. These things
yeah, it's
happen.
in. I mean, John Shuchuk, who's a former U.S. military meteorologist,
Uh-huh.
good person to follow for climate and weather related stuff.
Mhm.
He's also he really likes bashing the climate alarmists as well. But he's basically there was a people were, at one point was saying, well, it was late last night, early this morning. There was videos of what looked like another hurricane in front of Milton.
Yeah. Oh,
And
the
John was
the
actually
the
saying,
weather system that had appeared.
yeah, and he said that the one that was in front was actually draining potential energy from the one behind and thereby
Mhm.
neutralizing it. I also caught a tweet from Ben Davidson this afternoon, just before I left
Oh, the
work.
one about there was evidence of a plane that might have been cloud seeding just before the hurricane's eye collapsed and it went down to Cat 1. And yet, all the
Yeah,
conspiracy theorists are crickets. I think that's almost exactly what he said.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, the thing is that I mean, there was a Soviet woodpecker signal back in the '60s, and
Yeah.
I mean this weather modification stuff. This is not new, and I've sometimes wondered whether there aren't some sort of clandestine weather wars going on, where one side is causing weather to, I don't know, floods in China and then floods in North Carolina. I'm not saying this is what's happening. And the other point that Ben Davidson makes perfectly accurately is that we're in the middle of a geomagnetic excursion. So the planet's electromagnetic field is all over the place.
Mhm.
And that impacts, I mean,
Oh, yeah.
it's
Yeah.
the sun and the planet's um, electromagnetic field has much more of an impact on the climate than
Yeah.
us puny
And
humans.
and
That's for
the,
sure.
these things occur in cycles as well. I remember going to Florida in the 80s quite a few times and getting slammed by hurricanes. And it was
Sure.
like, for
Wait,
fuck's sake, and it stopped me going between June and September because you were getting slammed all the time in hurricane season. That's why I started going in May. And if you want to go to Florida, May's the time to go because the schools aren't out. The South Americans aren't there. The weather's tolerable, i.e., it's not like super hot and super humid. So May is the time to go to Florida. And that travel bonus there that you got was not sponsored by by the state of Florida, and we aren't sponsored by the state of Florida. But if you want to contribute in any small way to maintaining this channel, you can still support us at ko-fi.com/chasing descent, or you can support us at ko-fi.com/Sergeant Grumpy. SGT Grumpy. All one word.
Well, at least you're getting much more slick at doing your commercial bit
without pimping myself out. Is that what you're saying? You're trying to say pimping myself out. Thank you, Ed.
I was trying to be nice. You said it, not me.
Right. So we were talking there about.
Have you just one more name to throw into the mix? Have you seen the film The Dimming? And have you ever been to geoengineeringwatch.org?
I haven't seen The Dimming. I have seen The Dimming.
That's Dane Wigington, his name is. And he makes some very convincing arguments. I mean, they've taken planes and flown them through whatever these trails in the sky are, and they're picking up levels of aluminium and strontium and barium. We've also got massively elevated levels of aluminium, particularly in the food supply and the water supply. I don't understand why UK rainfall has to be milky white if you collect it. At least it is around here. Yeah, you put a cup. I mean, not milky white, obviously, but it looks like it's got calcium or something in it. There's particulate matter in the in the rain.
Well, it depends again, and I'm not making excuses, but it depends where your wind's coming from, because it does happen occasionally that we get a dump of sand from the Sahara.
Yeah, I know what that's like on my car, but it's a yellowy, reddy brown.
I've not seen that kind of dodgy water up here to that extent. I mean, you get stuff occasionally.
My car's constantly covered with it. My lounge windows are. And yes, I know I live in Brighton and there's salt, but I've lived here for 30 years.
Yeah,
and in that time, the salt levels in the sea haven't increased.
No.
But what the white shit on my windows and my car has.
But what has increased, Ed, and that's just regular flights over your area, because as you know, you know yourself, Heathrow is one of the busiest airports in the world. Gatwick can't be that far behind. You've also got Stansted, and you've got airports down in Bournemouth and whatever. But so general flights have increased. Now, even if there's nothing nefarious in them, right, you're going to get residue from all that kerosene that's getting burnt in the sky. Yeah? You are going to get some residue from them.
Yeah, but...
And it is kerosene, so it's basically paraffin.
I agree with that.
Yeah.
But it's not like chalk. I mean, if you have heavy rain here and you put a cup or a bucket or something outside and you look at the water that you collect, to start with, it doesn't look drinkable, and it's almost like there's chalk in it or something. And obviously there's no chalk falling from the sky.
Right. Okay.
And I don't know what it is, but I mean, there's plenty of experiments in terms of solar radiation management.
Right. Okay. But let's do this then. Right. Next time it rains heavy, you collect a glass of water.
That won't take long.
And I'll collect. I'll collect a glass of water up here. And a plain glass, and don't tamper with it. Don't try and put salt.
Obviously,
you're not going to do that, but. And we'll compare them and see if there's any difference, and see if there's any obvious. I mean, I'm not going to ask you to go and buy a microscope or anything, but we can compare them and see if there's any obvious difference. That would be reasonable. It's
just a visual test. I mean, it was last time I tried it.
Yeah. Well, let's do that. So next time it rains heavy, collect a glass of water. Okay. I mean, today it's been like glorious sunshine all day. So I'm hoping to see some aurora tonight. Because
Well,
this is
the aurora should have already started, because there's a guy that I follow on Twitter who's I think he's a Brighton-based photographer, and yeah, Eddie Mitchell at Brighton Snapper, and he's was posting pictures of auroras
right
down
now.
here 40 minutes ago. So I mean,
Bloody hell.
if you look out of a window and look north, you should probably
right.
see.
Keep them entertained for 2 seconds.
Keep them entertained. Oh right, yeah. Put me on the spot. Nice. Oh, actually, that was what I was going to mention. He probably can't hear me now, anyway. But another thing contributing to the weather was the Hunga Tonga volcanic eruption, which was, I think it's a couple of years ago now. But that actually dumped an unbelievably insane amount of water. The exact number I can't remember off the top of my head, but it was a lot. And based on what I've been reading, that takes 2 or so years to filter through, because it was blasted up to about 53 kilometers up, which is quite high. It's the asthenosphere. No, that's the planet. Hang on a minute, I got them confused. What is it? This is
Not
no
seen anything. I don't know if
nothing.
it's. I don't know if it's just too much in the town. Light pollution.
It's possible. Although, to be honest, based on the strength of the storm, it's you should be seeing them, because I mean, it was an above average CME.
Yeah. No, I don't know. I'll have.
But it also depends on what time it arrives, because I think it actually hit just before the sun went down here, which means we wouldn't have really seen much anyway.
Yeah.
But it's one thing that's worth noting, is that if the same level of storm, solar storm, had happened 10 or 15 years ago, we wouldn't see any auroras at all.
Yeah.
Which in itself is concerning. But I mean, going back to what you were saying about some people blaming everything on all clouds on chemtrails, or all suicides on Hillary Clinton, or all assassinations on the Jesuits, or all.
Yeah.
I'm always very skeptical and suspicious about people who ascribe every single thing to one thing, and it's because the world just it doesn't work like that.
Not everything is a conspiracy. While I am pretty sure there are conspiracies out there, right? Not everything is a conspiracy. Yeah.
And no, absolutely, yeah. Then you have to basically, part of the fun about rabbit hole explorations is trying to figure out what rings true and what doesn't. And ultimately, every single one of us has to make up our own minds about that.
Yeah.
And it's too easy to think that everything has one simple explanation, that it's all, you can attribute all of the problems in the world down to one particular thing.
Yeah. And people are quite quick to do that, especially down to certain individuals or even certain groups of people. And I personally don't think that we have like one group of people rules the world. I think that there are people who try and influence it, mainly for their own good. But even going back to the whole chemtrail thing, right? These people are poisoning themselves as well. Are they not?
Yeah,
And their families and their children and yeah.
I mean, one of the people that Dane Wigington talks about on Geoengineering Watch is, I think he's called David Francis, but he's basically one of these, because they have conferences about geoengineering and solar radiation management and stuff like that. And Wigington's actually got himself booted out of those meetings because he would go along and start asking questions like you've just asked about what are the health effects. And these essentially these zealots who are completely afraid of global warming and think that we have to do something about it, they actually admit that, yeah, okay, it's going to cause some damage, but even if maybe it kills 10% of the population or whatever, that's still worth it to stop the planet overheating.
Yeah. So this is the part that I don't get either, in that these people seem to get so embroiled in their particular rabbit hole or their particular theory that they will brook not even argument, they will brook no questioning of it. You can't even ask them a question, because I've seen it time and time again on Twitter. You ask someone, well, who are they, or who's doing what? And the next thing, you're blocked, And it's like, I mean, why so sensitive? Why do people not engage in any kind of reasoned discourse? And I'll, if I may be allowed just to rant a little here. And the other one that gets me is the left, right? Why do they always jump to ad hominem attacks in the very first sentence, Instead of saying, well, I don't agree with you, I think that's wrong because of such and such, they just go, you're wrong, knobhead or whatever. And it's like, that's not how, I mean, can you imagine doing that in a pub? Can you? I mean, what's going to happen? You know what's going to happen if you did that in a pub. Yeah?
Well, I think part of what's gone wrong with, or what's going wrong with human discourse and human interaction, it is precisely because we're not face to face. And when you're face to face with someone, a different set of social things kick in, and you feel basically more emboldened to say things that you wouldn't say to the person's face, because as you rightly point out, you get punched in the face. I'm not sure to necessarily say it's everybody on the left or everybody on the right, apart from the fact that the whole left-right paradigm is, I mean, I understand the sort of
possibly exaggerating.
I think it's actually more, well, no, obviously, but that's fine. It's just, it's more, apart from anything else, the left-right paradigm is an artificial control structure, just divide and rule on a big scale. But be that as it may, I think some people they identify with a particular theory, whether it's flat Earth, or whether it's chemtrails, or whether it's the no virus crowd. And I mean, I'm unconvinced about the existence of viruses. I don't know the science well enough to argue it, but at the same time, there seems to be this, I don't know, it's like people have to pick their team.
Well,
and when you're on that team, everyone else is wrong.
I think there's an argument for both germ theory and viral theory, I think there's an argument for both, and I think there's a possibility that there is a degree of both involved in things, because it's like if you've ever tried giving up sugar, right? You go through this thing called the keto flu, and it's like having withdrawal, and your nose is running. It's like, it's like having a flu. Your nose is running, your bones ache, you've no energy, you can't do anything, but it only lasts 2 or 3 days, and then you're by it, and it's like what your body's doing is it's withdrawing from having sugar and switching over to burning fat. And it causes all these physical symptoms that are real. It's not, they're not imagined. And literally, I've said to people, if you're going to go proper keto and you're going to start and get off sugar, and like any addiction, the quickest way of doing anything when it comes to an addiction is cold turkey, right? It's not maybe the most pleasant, but it's the quickest, right? But so you can go off sugar without dying, if you go cold turkey. But it hurts. It does literally hurt. And I've said to people, see if you can do it a weekend or take a day off, or something like that. Take some holidays. So as you don't try and do this at your work, because you will suffer. And the thing is, once you've done it once, and then maybe slipped back into sugar and you go back, it gets less and less hard. It gets easier and easier for your body to switch from sugar burning to, ketone burning, which is fat. Which is quite interesting. So that again is back to like the germ theory thing, because if you do a 3-day fast, your body kicks into that thing called autophagy, where it starts burning up all the crap that you've got lying about, because it's not being fed, so it starts getting rid of all the old cells and things like that, tidying. It's basically cleaning house, right? It cleans house, and then, in about day 3 of your fast, you have this purge where you get rid of all that. And then when you start refeeding again, your body starts building new cells and with fresh proteins and everything, and you feel better, and you've lost a bit of weight, and everything works better. And you can cure things. Like my wife cured her. Well, I can't claim that you cure things with fasting, because that would be wrong, wouldn't it? So you can't, but you can maybe alleviate symptoms by fasting. Because my wife had carpal tunnel syndrome, and they're not supposed to fix that. And she fasted, and she cancelled the scheduled surgery because she doesn't have it anymore.
Well, there are plenty of examples, and a lot of them on YouTube as well. I mean, there are some fantastic lectures and videos about the power of fasting.
Yeah.
And it's also, if you think about how humans naturally react to it's the old feed a cold, starve a fever.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I mean, it's granny's wisdom, as it were.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, I'm a big believer in letting the body sort itself out. Although I'm not massively addicted to sugar. I do have sugar every day, but I'm massively addicted to nicotine.
Oh God, I made a mistake, didn't I? I made the mistake of telling people what a horrible drug nicotine is, right? And oh my God, you think I'd made a personal attack on them? All I said was nicotine in itself is a pretty horrible drug, because it's highly addictive, right? And it's a really effective vasoconstrictor. So it shuts down, it narrows down your capillaries and arteries and everything, which causes loads of problems in your cardiovascular system, and your breathing system and your organs and stuff like that. My God, you think I'd gone to war on smokers? And it's like, I never even mentioned tobacco. I didn't mention tobacco. I just said nicotine itself, and it's like, oh, but nicotine has so many benefits. Well, yeah, and very, very small doses and really tightly controlled. But on balance, nicotine does more harm than good. And hey, you know what? This thing here, wine, right? On balance, does more harm than good. Yeah? I mean, I can accept that though, but people that are so invested in, I don't know if it's smoking or if it's nicotine or whatever, but they're so invested in it that they can't hear you criticise it, which to me seems a weird place to be in. How can you not take criticism of something that is bad for you? Yeah, I mean, you're a nicotine addict, self-confessed, right? It's bad for you, but you keep taking it, And the thing is, why would you go nuts and defend it?
My brain works better when I'm smoking.
It maybe does. Somebody debate that.
To be honest, to be honest, I saw your post, and I could have responded, but I didn't.
No, you're probably better out here, mate.
Because, well, apart from anything else, I knew we were probably going to end up talking about it on the podcast anyway. But it's primarily, and it's an addiction. It's something for my hands to do.
Yeah.
There's all sorts of reasons I smoke. One of the reasons I smoke is to not be a non-smoker.
But
I personally think that the all of the health nonsense that we had with COVID actually started. All of this authoritarian control freakery
yeah,
actually started with the smoking ban. They started with the low-hanging fruit, the thing that was bad for you. And okay, let's focus on the smoking and ignore every single other harmful chemical in our
yeah,
environment, the stuff in our washing powders, the
yeah.
stuff in everything. I mean, they
Do you know there's
left
a class
lead
action
in
lawsuit?
petrol.
Do you know there's a class action lawsuit on just now against Procter and Gamble because stuffing shampoo makes your hair fall out?
Well, doesn't surprise me.
And
And
Procter
I
and
mean, the
Gamble
thing,
also market a product that stops your hair falling.
well, it's the same as the pharma companies that have one thing that causes cancer and then claim to have another thing that cures it. I mean, they left lead in
Petrol?
fuel
Yeah,
for decades, knowing exactly. They knew what it was going to do before they even
yeah.
started using it.
But to be
And
fair, it was difficult to run a car. Certain cars, it was really difficult to run them without lead because they cause so
mhm.
much damage, you know?
Well, I mean, it was the engine, the knocking in the engine
Mhm.
was the reason.
Yeah.
Um,
I
but
mean,
then instead of
I tried to convert my Opel Manta to run on unleaded twice. And after I'd blown 2 head cylinder gaskets, I thought, sod it, I'm just going to put leaded fuel in it. Because you know what? I was quite a green advocate in my youth. You know, I'd seen the Emerald Forest. I thought we were damaging the planet. And we probably are to an extent. But I think in real terms, right, I think the planet looks after itself pretty well. And I think
oh, in the words of
we've got to go to extremes to actually make a difference. And I think countries that are going to extremes, like India, right, which have rivers of refuse. I mean, they just I don't know if you've seen the videos, but they just turn up with the scaffy wagon and just tip it into the river. You know, so where's that going? You know where it's going? Going to roll up on a beach somewhere in the Bahamas, and you're going to go, why are there so many flip flops? But yeah, but the countries that are ripping the piss out it are the countries that have got huge populations, and it's like, I mean, the Latimer Aldo thing that we did. You know, Britain is leading the world in climate reductions and carbon reductions. We are leading the world. And over the last 16 years, our contribution has reduced the global temperature of the world by 1/4000th of a degree. 1/4000th of a degree in 16 years. That's what Britain's achieved in 16
well,
years of carbon, well, not capture, but of carbon, or of trying to avoid burning carbon and putting ourselves into a poverty trap when it comes to energy. That's what we've achieved. 1/4000th of a degree.
well, none of the climate doomsayers and predictions have ever come true, going right the way back to the 70s.
Well, yeah, I mean, we should be in an ice age right now,
And they
shouldn't
don't,
we?
but
We should be under a
well,
glacier.
all they, well, yeah. And I mean, the Maldives shouldn't be there anymore. And the Arctic should be ice free, although this year they've actually had to suspend Arctic shipping earlier
Yeah,
than
I
usual
know.
because there's too much ice,
I
even though
know.
the Arctic is warming up and there's not going to be any ice in 5-10 years, whatever.
It's the sun, Nick.
I mean,
Nick Taridis says it's the sun. We know it's the sun. We know it's the sun. It is the sun. But right,
well, obviously,
so why is it just Twitter then, right, that these people are appearing? Because there just seems to be more and more of them, and they seem to be latching on to these ideals and not letting them go. This is the thing I don't understand. And
well, sometimes I think that because we all know about the 77th and the bots
yeah,
and the bad side, the
Yeah.
ones that harass us and report us and just generally leave shitty comments and all that kind of thing. But we spend less time thinking about the infiltration and the manipulation that's being done by people who come across as one of us, but actually aren't, and they're there specifically to cause division.
Like Russell
And
Brand.
and I'm well, yeah, he's a whole. I mean, we could probably do an entire bloody episode about that dickhead. No, I'm talking more about the low profile ones. I mean, obviously there are probably some high profile ones,
Yeah.
like potentially Brand, because I don't trust him as far as I can throw him. But I sometimes wonder if some of the people who claim to be on our side of the fence, but argue one of these points to the point of exhaustion, and everything is down to Freemasons. And if you disagree, then you're a shill and a Freemason as well. I'm not sure that all of them are
So,
genuine, frankly,
so
because I think it's. I
can
mean, to be honest, if you're trying to disrupt the conversation, that's a good way of doing it. You don't just have people
yeah.
on the negative side; you have people on the positive side as well, and you try and steer it.
Can I ask you a question
Of
that
course.
I'd like you to answer honestly? Okay. Do I come across as too skeptical? Do you think I might be controlled opposition?
Um, no, we've had enough conversations, and I met you in person. I don't think you're controlled opposition. I think that if you know what Scottish people are like, then the answer to that question is no. But if you
Okay.
don't know what Scottish people are like, then one might be forgiven for misinterpreting your general Scottish grumpiness
Yeah.
with with more skeptic. Sometimes I think maybe for people who don't know you or don't know what Scottish people are like, your manner may mean that you project more skepticism
Yeah.
and what's the right word? I don't know, but yeah, I think it's to some extent personality.
Mhm.
Um, but some people are very sensitive. I mean, the thing is that
Mm.
schools don't teach debating. They don't teach people to
No,
solve problems anymore. I mean,
they
I
don't seem to.
sometimes think. I mean, if I look at friends that I've got who are maybe 10 years younger, they're much more inclined to ask someone for an answer rather than go and figure the answer out themselves. Whereas people from my peer group, people that I was at school
Yeah.
with, people who are my age or older, are actually more likely to go and try and solve the problem themselves rather than asking someone to effectively do it for them. And I think schools have got a lot, and I mean, I think the government has got a lot to answer for with that, because I mean, even if you look at um, like final year school examinations from 60 or 70 years ago, there'd be university students today that
Mhm.
would struggle
Yeah.
with answering some of those questions. And I mean, the Rockefeller control of the education system, the intention was to dumb it down. I mean,
Oh,
there's plenty of.
I think we've achieved that. I think education, and I may be talking out the top of my head here, but I think education even isn't even a a fifth of what we used to get. It seems to be that it's more focused on social things rather than facts and how things are. I mean, when I was at school, almost all the socializing was left to the kids in the playground. And when you were in the classroom, you were told and taught facts and how to question. I mean, I remember my
You just
modern.
hit the nail on the head. The difference is that people used to be taught how to think. Now they're taught what to think.
Yeah.
And I think just
Yeah.
based on, I actually feel lucky that I haven't got any kids, because the amount of arguments that I would have ended up having with teachers and schools about some of the garbage that kids are
Oh,
being taught.
you know what, mate?
Um,
We took our kids out of school. Sean, we took out of school because he is diagnosed autistic, and basically the secondary school were putting him in a room and letting him watch videos all day. So he'd done really well. We fought and fought to get him out of a special school and into mainstream primary, which we did, and he came on leaps and bounds. But he got taken under the care of a teacher who gave him maybe additional help, right? But he really came on leaps and bounds in primary school, and everything improved, including his behaviour dramatically. He then went to secondary school, to a good
one good
school.
teacher can make so much
Yeah,
difference.
but he went to a secondary school, a good school, Largs Academy, right? I mean, it's got a great reputation, and they did fuck all for him. So we took him out of school and we taught him ourselves, and he's now got a degree and he's working, because he went on to college and then he went on to university and got himself a degree, which is great. And we took our daughter out of school come COVID because she's quite a sensitive soul, bless her, and she just couldn't cope with all this masking shit and you know, people just the whole thing. She just couldn't cope with it, right? So we took her out of school, and in effect, the kids of that generation that were in secondary school lost their school years because it was 2 years the schools were effectively shut, which was a disgrace. So we took her out of school and we moved. We went to France, and she went to school in France, which was quite good from a social aspect, but not from a learning point of view. But now she's at college, and she's witty, she's smart, she's skeptical, and she's not frightened to come back at you, which is quite good from my point. I think that's a great way to be. She just doesn't. I mean, she's put herself up as the class rep at college, which is something she would never have done, prior to COVID.
That's fantastic. And to be
Yeah.
honest, I think modern schools are actually doing kids more harm than
Mhm.
good in a lot of ways.
I think you're right, mate. Yeah.
If I had kids, I would. I'd seriously have to think about homeschooling them,
Mhm.
figuring out a way of doing it, because it's just mass indoctrination. They have the narratives, and the government is so, or governments. It's not just ours. I think it's all of them.
Yeah.
Um, they're so focused on control and pushing their version of the truth. And the problem is that once their version of the truth becomes clearly nonsense,
Mhm.
and it's not difficult to do some research and figure out that it's nonsense, which is most of what we've been told by the media and the government in 2024, the
Yeah, but
mainstream stuff.
most people won't.
It's no, but not just that. They've now got it to the point, thanks to the COVID, that anyone who does question things is a bad person. Is
We
somehow
are.
you're
We are your single source of truth.
yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And
Yeah.
and they're so, you have people like John Kerry and Hillary Clinton talking about how the First Amendment is a problem. I mean, the founding fathers of the United States turning in their bloody graves. And I mean,
What is it?
when you
Clinton
listen
said
to what
she needs control of all social media.
yeah, but when you listen to what people like Thomas Jefferson and Ben Franklin and George Washington said about how it's why it was the first bloody amendment,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
because that's how important it is. That even if you don't read any of the other ones, as long as you read that one,
Yeah.
that's and it's because it's the freedom from which all other freedoms stem.
Yeah.
Is the right to express ourselves. I mean, it's enshrined in international humanitarian law. It's passed the United Nations. It's the International Declaration of Human Rights. I mean, but because it's now inconvenient for forces that seek to control everything, suddenly it's a problem.
Did you see that tweet today from the Home Office?
I didn't.
The one about the one that Yvette Cooper said that they needed to stamp out.
I did see that one. Yeah.
They needed to stamp out anti-Semitism and Islamophobia, and they could not tolerate any hatred. And did you see my reply?
No.
So I replied saying, no, that's completely wrong, because you need to allow people to hate, and you need to allow them to hate openly, right? Because if you don't allow people to hate and try and punish them for their hatred, all you do is drive that hatred underground, right? And then when it does burst, you get a whole storm that you'd wish you'd never even thought about. So you've got to allow people to express their hatred. You've got to allow people to not like certain things. And that's the only time when you can then engage with these people and either educate them or educate yourself, you know? You can't hide hatred. It's part of the human psyche. You need to be able. I mean, there are things I hate. There are things you hate. It doesn't matter, right? Don't think of it. Do not think of this as a group of people, right? Think of this as you are not allowed to hate anything, right? So you're having baked beans for tea tonight, Ed. Now you may not. You hate baked beans, right? And let's just say you hate baked beans, but you're not allowed to hate baked beans, right? So what you do is you force those baked beans down your throat, and that hatred then starts to simmer and simmer. And every time you're forced to eat baked beans for your dinner, one day that hatred's going to explode, right? And nobody's ever addressed it. Nobody's ever told you why you can't hate baked beans. Nobody's ever told you that maybe it is okay to hate baked beans, and then you can get an exception and not do that. So while what I'm saying isn't directly transferable to where you were maybe going to go, right? If you don't allow people to express hatred, how can you change views? That's my point.
I think the whole point of talking about, well, there's a scene in V for Vendetta.
Yeah.
Where V has just done his invasion of the TV studio. Yeah. And it's clear for everybody to see what's happened, and he's just broadcast his speech and everything else.
Yeah.
And then the next day, the newscaster comes on, and he talks about the terrorist broadcasting his message of hate. And this whole notion of hate being, it's almost like a perversion of the English language, because to say a message of hate or hate speech, it's just the use of the word makes me cringe a bit, because it's so propagandistic.
Oh yeah, they're weaponizing it. They're weaponizing it. That's what they're doing.
Precisely. And it's not, look, we're human beings. We're capable of a range of emotions, from love through to hate. And there are some things, like you're saying, some people love baked beans, some people hate them.
Well, it's going off in the chat right
now crime? well, is hatred of Marmite a crime? Are we gonna turn anyone who? Are we going to say anyone who hates Marmite is guilty of a hate crime?
Can't stand Marmite.
Well, exactly. But the whole point is that to say that something is a hate crime, it's meaningless, control-oriented, authoritarian bollocks, in my opinion, because it's you can't. I mean, I don't hate an entire. It's ridiculous to say that someone would hate a racial group. You can hate someone.
You can hate behaviors.
Exactly. You can hate someone for a particular attitude they might take or actions they might take. I mean, I have an intense hatred of people who rape children. Yeah. But the government seems to be letting them off and locking up people who say hatey things online. I mean, it's just it's a nonsense. And it's what Voltaire said, those who can make you believe absurdities can make you commit atrocities. And we've seen evidence of that almost every day for the last 5 years at least. I mean, certainly 5 years, 4 or 5 years where it's really been in our faces. But what's hateful is the way that people turned on those of us who refused to get the arms down.
Yeah.
Not all of us, but and it's the people who, it's like some of the absolutely vile NAFO trolls who are supposedly Slavo-Ukrainian, all this nonsense, which is basically just the same as that famous 1930s German slogan that everybody knows that I'm not going to repeat.
Yeah.
Or it's the same with, I mean, the Israeli-Palestinian thing is even more polarizing. I mean, and it's not. It just seems to be a symptom of the times.
Well, I think. Do you not think?
I think it's being encouraged.
Well, yeah, I think it is, because if you start people up against each other, right? And it's like, I mean, I saw something on Twitter today, a video of a Democrat liberal guy in a mask pulling a gun on a guy, an unarmed man who had restrained someone, right? He pulled a gun on him to make him let the guy go. Right? Now, this is the party. This is the Democratic Party, the party of anti-war, anti-violence, anti-authoritarianism.
But they're not anti-war.
No, not anymore. They were.
Never been the anti-war.
Yeah, they were. They kind of were. They were the flower power generation. If you were a liberal, you voted Democrat, right?
But it was Democrat
you were against war.
That increased Okay.
Yeah, and listen, I know the history. I know it was the Democrats that came up with the Ku Klux Klan and all that. I know, but the perception was if you were a Democrat, you were against violence, right? But this guy was open carrying and pulled a gun on what I can only assume was a Republican. Now is that not what we are getting driven towards? We're being driven towards civil war. Because it's getting to the point you can't, when was the last time you had an actual, and when I say argument, I mean it in the point of being able to put forward points and debate them, right, on Twitter with anyone from the left. And I'll let Ray out of this because I did call him a lefty. I thought he was a bit of a lefty. He is a bit of a lefty, but he took offence at it. But yeah, when was the last time you were actually able to have an argument with someone from the left without them going in a huff or insulting you?
I don't argue with people on Twitter.
Well, I've noticed since I stopped arguing. Since I kind of stopped arguing, what I tend to do now is I tend to use the, I'm dropping a bomb, right? And I'm flying away.
I don't bother. I literally, because
it gets great engagement. If you drop a bomb and then fly away, muting the conversation as you go, right? You get fantastic engagement in your stats. My stats are all green now, right? Everything's on the up. So I drop these truth bombs on them and then just fly away.
Yeah, and part of the problem that I've got with Twitter is engagement farming.
Oh, engagement farming. I went through a whole phase. Every time somebody said something like, what's your favourite ice cream? Block. Do you like horses or ponies? Block. These whole stupid questions are nothing but blatant engagement farming, and not even good engagement farming, Some of this stuff's on the cusp. Some people I like, I've actually decided to block because I'm fed up with their engagement farming, You're not one of them yet.
Well, I post, the stuff that I post on Twitter, I don't post to...
You haven't posted a lot yet.
Get responses. and quite often the ones, because it's when you get people riled up and they all pile in, and I just block them. I mean, I don't. There's plenty of people that I follow and I'm mutual followers with that I strenuously disagree with about all sorts of things. But the person in question happens, they, apart from anything else, they're always polite. And they happen to do really good research about a particular topic that I'm interested in. And the research that they do on that, to me, is
Right. Let's
like straight up.
Yeah. No.
But at the same time, there are other topics where I just and if I see them post something and I think that's just totally wrong, instead of climbing up their butt about it, I just ignore it.
Yeah.
I just
See,
don't,
I
don't engage with it.
I think it's my Scottish psyche that does this, but I can't let it go. Right? If someone's completely wrong, I've kind of got to point it out, even if it's someone I like. I mean, I've done it to you. I have done it to you, right? And I've certainly done it to Ray and other people. And it's like, it's like, well, actually, the case is this is the point, not what you think. But anyway, let's jump in briefly to the chat. So where are we? It's going to be like the Spanish Civil War. Long live anarchy, says Robin. Could be. Yazzie says our mum and dad were proper 60s hippies. Dad got banged up for being part of Operation Julie. What was Operation Julie? I don't know about that. Whereas Britmate says, how very Saul Alinsky of you, John. What would that be in regard to? Was that to do with my speech about hatred? Robin says he's fighting the Jesus is God squad right now. Britmate says, do you see it yet? That's very cryptic. Robin, why are you wrong? Why? I don't know. Why am I wrong? Tell me. Braveheart. Yeah, okay. So, yeah. No, I mean, it's always good to... it was in Wales. Beats and Tape says it was in Wales. What was in Wales? Dun 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 dun. Little Purple. I don't know what's happening now. They're talking about strange things. Right. So these why? I keep coming back to this. Why? Why do people need to hang on to these things with such ferocity?
Because they identify with it. It goes from being something that they know to something that they believe. And once you cross that threshold into this is something I believe, the next step up from that is it becomes part of your identity. And it's not just something that you believe, but it becomes part of who you are.
So then it's personal.
It's the same with it's the climate thing. And I mean, Matthias Desmet, who it opened my eyes to a lot of the psychology behind what happened during COVID.
Yeah.
He makes an awful lot of sense in what he says about it. And once you identify with something and it becomes part of your personality and the rest of your life, it's like back in the day when we were in charge of our own destinies. You're working in a field or you're hunting and gathering or whatever. You have your life in your hands. You're not, if you eat that day, it's based on how much work you put in, and everybody knows it. And so even though your life might be simple and difficult, it has a deep sense of meaning. And one of the things that the modern world has done is it's taken that away for a lot of people, that we've just been boiled down to these consumers and we have to spend, and you have all these TV adverts telling you that you're not good enough unless you have the right deodorant, or you're never going to find a woman if you don't have the right car, or you have to have the right shoes, or if you're a girl, you have to have a particular type of lipstick or the guys aren't going to like you, or you have to look a certain way or act a certain way or whatever. And it's all very empty and meaningless. And a lot of people have jobs that they don't make a difference,
Yeah.
or even worse, they're working for some because they need the money. They're working for some big corporate people that
Yeah.
are busy raping and pillaging around the world. And so, because of that, their sense of self is very much determined by the things that they believe in and the groups that they identify with, whether that's the Rainbow Brigade or the Green Brigade or the right or the left or whoever. And then once that becomes part of your identity, if you then have someone who comes along and challenges it, it's like when you have an argument or when you make a comment on Twitter, you're basically just saying, I think that that particular belief that you hold might not necessarily be accurate, but
Mhm.
the problem that is that on the receiving end, that's interpreted as you are wrong.
Yeah.
And that's how they see it. And that's how it registers emotionally. And because there are no consequences for them jumping down your throat, they'll just spout off.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think
Um,
you're right.
and also because we're people,
Yeah. Mhm.
sometimes people can be having an off day. Sometimes they can have so much going on in their lives, or they're in the middle of an argument, or their relationship is breaking down. There's
Oh
all
no,
sorts of things.
exactly that. Because I was watching a video from I don't know if you've ever heard of Tony and Chelsea Northrop. They're photographers. And you know they've made a shitload of money on YouTube, and they've got a nice life and everything. And I think she was a model, and then he was a photographer, and they ended up getting together. But they've got a nice life together, and that's really good. And when they started YouTube way back in 2012, so they've been around for a long time. And she said early doors, there was there was one guy in particular who just started everywhere she was on social media. She got hammered. He hammered her. This, bang. And it got to the stage that she was getting to the point where she was waking up in the morning and frightened about what she was going to see, right? And then she said, like, then it stopped. It all stopped. And then, like, 2 years later or something like that, he sent her a message saying, "Look, I'm really, really sorry about how I behaved because this was happening to me. I was in a really bad place and I just vented on you for some reason." And it's like, yeah, that's not right. It's not right. But people do that. That's the problem. People do this kind of thing. And yeah, I think you're right, Ed. You've got to understand that some people might be having a bad day, but that doesn't stop me blocking them.
Oh no, but I mean, that's why I think
Yeah.
the fact of the muskrat wanting to take
Mm.
away the block function, or no, he wants to change it so that if you block someone, they can still see your stuff, but you don't engage with them, that they
Yeah, well,
can't
that's
engage with
mute.
you or
That's
like
just
anything,
mute.
or
I mean, no,
I
I think he's wrong. Surely somebody's got to point out to him that you've got to have the block function because it. I think it could be a safety issue.
I
You
think
know.
it absolutely is a safety issue,
Yeah.
particularly for women,
Yeah.
particularly in light of, I mean, that particular little story that you just recounted. That's a perfect
Yeah.
example
Yeah.
of why you need to be able to block people and get rid of them so that they can't see you, you can't see them, and everyone just lives happily ever after. And I mean, I use the block function in Twitter extensively. If I'm not blocking 4 or 5 people a day, then I'm not actually on Twitter. Um, and it's not people that I
Sorry,
disagree with.
I'm not laughing at you, mate. I'm laughing at something I saw in the chat.
I mean, it's also sometimes you see someone and they're actually interacting with someone else, and I block them anyway just because they have asshole potential.
I know. See the amount of time sometimes I'm thinking, what the fuck are you going on about? And why are you addressing me like that? And then I click into the conversation and realise they're actually answering someone else. And I was about to send, 2 barrels down. But I thought, oh, okay, fair enough.
I get that in my notifications all the time. Literally, you'll and the funniest one is where you retweet something
Yeah.
from, I don't know, the Prime Minister or whoever, and someone will dive into your notifications and have an absolutely massive rant and
At the
not
Prime
actually
Minister.
mention the fact that, and you have to read it a couple of times. Hang on a minute, are they having a go at me or are they having a go at
No.
Keir Starmer? And you kind of sometimes
Yeah.
want to point out to people that replying to someone's retweet or replying to someone's quote tweet, it's not going to get seen by the person that you're trying to.
So I have to mention this. Ray has said his identity is now confused. Thanks to Sergeant Grumpy. Am I a lefty? I don't know, Ray. Only you can answer that question, mate. I mean, how do you?
This
how
whole
do you
left-right paradigm is such nonsense. I mean, it's just.
Well, is it? Is that a nonsense?
Well, when there was no left-right until Karl Marx came along, pretty much.
Okay. So
And when you look at
we had the Whigs
when
and
you
the
look
Tories.
at Karl Marx's
Right, hold on.
history,
Let's go back. We had the Whigs and the Tories, didn't we? Right, and the Whigs were the Liberals. Yeah.
But is that left and right?
No, that wasn't really left and right. It was the Whigs and the Tories, right? So we had the Tories who were more authoritarian, and we had the Whigs who were more liberal. Yeah. And then Karl Marx came along, and yeah, I think Labour Party's fucking communist.
What, the modern Labour Party?
Oh yeah, definitely.
I don't know.
Right, communism is one step away from fascism. I mean, people think fascism is extreme right. It's not. It's extreme left.
Well,
I mean, Stalin. Would you call Stalin a communist or a fascist? He was effectively a fascist, was he not?
Well, no.
Yeah.
Because according to Mussolini, fascism is a merger of corporate and state power.
Yeah, and what exactly is happening in China right now, right? So Xi must be a fascist, not a communist.
I don't know enough about China.
No, look at China.
Well, the thing is that China has this weird mix of, they have a communist government, but then they have lots of capitalist. I mean, China's actually now, it's more capitalist than most capitalist countries. They just happen to have this
but
weird
it's
communist
heavily
government.
state controlled. They allow the people running the capitalist wing of it to get certain privileges. They allow certain areas to have special economic concessions. But effectively, it is the merge of government and capitalism. China, in my view, is a fascist country.
I don't know, because it depends on how you define fascism and what you define as fascism. And from my perspective, China is not invading other countries.
But you don't need to invade other countries to be a fascist.
Well, if a country,
China is invading other countries, right? It's just not doing it militarily.
But it's lifting its people out of poverty.
Yeah,
but China, creating infrastructure.
China is invading other countries. It's just not doing it militarily. China has more,
but it's arguably helping those countries. It's building things.
Well, yes and no. China has secret police stations in most Western countries, right? There are 3 in Glasgow, in which it controls the Chinese people that are our citizens, right? But they have to report back to China because everybody here that came from Hong Kong has got someone back in. I mean, when we gave up Hong Kong, we riddled ourselves with a whole set of Chinese spies. Because everybody here has relatives back home in China or Hong Kong, and the Chinese government have access to them now. And therefore, they have to report back to the Chinese government. China is a fascist country, and China is actually like what's that thing in the octopus, Hydra. China is Hydra. it's got its fingers in everybody's pie.
Oh, that's...
No, it does. It does. Well, look at Belt and Road. What's Belt and Road other than an incentive to be friends with China? But we'll get our people in and we'll do things for you to help you. But we'll use our Chinese people to do it. Or we'll use some of your people, but we'll pay them really badly. And the Chinese people will be the... China's insidious. It is Hydra. It really is.
The whole world is bloody insidious. To say that one country is any better than another country is an absurdity.
Whoa. Did I ever say one country was better than another? Did I ever say that?
No.
No, right. So, listen, if we want to start going down what country's better than the other, I have no idea where I would go. Say someone gave me $1 million tomorrow and said, you can go wherever you like. I don't know where to go because I just want to get away from all this shit. And $1 million isn't going to get me to the moon.
Yeah.
You
I don't know.
That's how I feel, right? Where could you go to escape this? Yeah, maybe somewhere in Alaska, get a plot of land and build a cabin in the middle of nowhere. But where do you escape all this shit? Because is there a country that's untouched? Is there a country that's going to let you alone? I mean, some are better than others. Yeah, some are better than others, but some have more state control, some have less. But ultimately, they all have control over you. Cambodia? Are you having a fucking laugh, Robin? I mean, why would I want to go to Cambodia? See, the problem is, why would you want to go somewhere where nobody speaks English? Or where they treat you as a foreigner? Because forget Thailand, forget China, forget Japan, forget anywhere in the Far East, because they treat you as a foreigner. And if they're nice to your face, which they will be because they don't want to lose face, or mianzi as they call it, right? They will be nice to your face, but you are a foreigner. If in Thailand you're Farang or whatever it is, they will not treat you like they treat their own. And so therefore the Far East is out. I love the Far East, but if you don't own it, there's no point in going there. And that might sound horrible, right? But giving up Hong Kong was the worst thing we ever did.
The whole notion of us having Hong Kong in the first bloody place is absurd. I mean, what the hell?
Right, okay, but why?
Because
why?
It was a British colony. The whole,
why is it absurd?
Well,
the British... Okay, the whole notion of the Boers being in South Africa is absurd.
Well, that's colonialism. I mean, the fact
why was it colonialism? They bought the country. They paid off the natives that were there, right? They have documents to prove that. Why is that colonialism? Nobody else. I mean, the people that took it over don't. They forcibly wrested it off the people that owned it. I mean, it's like the Chagos Islands. We got the Chagos Islands signed over to us from the French. The first thing we did was release all the slaves, right? And then the slaves had nowhere to go and no means of surviving, right? So we took them all on as employees. Yeah, they might be indentured employees, but they're still employees. And that allowed them to continue living and to continue living there, which is what most of them wanted to do, right? They didn't want to fucking be Mauritians. They wanted to be continued part of the British, and we just gave it all away. Why? I mean, it's all very well to say, oh, we don't do colonialism anymore, but sometimes colonialism isn't a bad thing. I may be wrong. I usually am.
Name one instance where colonialism was a good thing.
Well,
anyway, listen, it's getting late. I'm knackered.
Sorry, am I annoying you?
No, it's fine. I'm done.
Right. Are you coming back tomorrow?
Don't know at the moment.
Oh, you don't seem very happy.
Well, I haven't really had a gotten a chance to have a word in edgeways this
Oh,
evening,
come
so
on.
I'm not sure there's much point.
Come on, Ed.
Well,
come on, I really value your opinion. Okay,
yeah,
I
well,
had
you
a
keep
rant
talking over
there.
me.
What?
No, no, but I start trying to say something and I get talked over, so I
No,
just get to a point where it's like,
I don't think
oh,
that's the case. Come on. Don't be
anyway.
like that.
But I mean, as far as colonialism goes, I've lived in Africa, I've lived in Europe,
You
and
have,
the whole
yeah.
world is fucked. People are fucked everywhere.
But
I have days where
do you think the you think the death of colonialism has improved Africa?
I think Africa should have just been left alone. I think that the colonials they took their administrative people out, by which point they'd already put in all of the companies and they put in all of the structures and they'd done just enough development to make it easy to extract whatever they needed to extract. And then the companies just went on extracting stuff and they corrupted the locals, which meant that none of the money was used internally. And anytime that a country seems to look at Venezuela, anytime a country wants to use, or Iran, Mossadegh, anytime a country wants to use its resources to help its own people, they get regime changed.
Right. Okay. Yes. So,
Apart from when they're big enough, like China or Russia or
but
one of these other ones,
then
where they can actually say no.
what then is the difference, right, between what the the British or the Boers did in Africa, right, and what China's trying to do right now?
The British left a bloody mess in Africa.
And
The Boers were a mixture of Dutch, French, and Germans.
yeah,
And actually, Africa's a complicated one because, apart from anything else, different countries in Africa had different colonial experiences. One country that I always go back to is Botswana.
mm-hmm.
And the Botswana, I don't know quite what it was that their chief did differently, but Botswana established a very different relationship with the colonial powers, with the British particularly, and managed to maintain a lot more independence.
Mm-hmm.
They've basically never really colonized. And at the same time, they've got fabulous diamond resources and stuff like that. So it's not, you can't, every country is different to start with. It's like your example of Hong Kong.
Yeah,
There are some things that the British did right, and there are some things that the British did terribly. I mean,
mm-hmm.
bloody, the British fought a war so that they could send opium to China, for crying out loud,
Yeah,
to keep
yeah,
the Chinese down.
yeah. They did. Yeah.
We've basically been trying to keep the Russians down and break Russia up for
Yeah.
what, 200 years.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
And at the same time, you have the Belgium experiences in the Congo. If you want to look at bad colonialism,
Right. Oh,
Belgian colonies were fiefdoms of King Leopold, and he just
yeah.
used to do human hunting, and people would get their hands chopped off for
Yeah.
minor offences. And now it's a I don't know. You have these child slave mines pulling
Uh-huh.
cobalt out of the ground for our wonderful technological future.
Right. Okay. But in some respects, though, what would these countries have done if you hadn't been there? I mean, because you said you maybe think that Africa should have been left alone. So would it still be basically a hunter gatherer civilization? I don't know.
No, me neither. But that's I mean, that's not a question we
But
can answer.
but we're
I
humans,
have
Ed. We don't leave people alone. That's the problem. We don't. We always want to be in there, and we want to be doing what we think is right. And the problem is, what we think is right isn't necessarily right. So we're always putting our neb in, right, and changing things. And yeah, we'll get it wrong, but sometimes we get it right. You know, and it's like if you hadn't had, you know, Team America World Police, what would the world be like right now? Would we have descended into, you know, just a whole myriad of squabbling nations that were just fighting against each other all the time? I mean, I mock Team America World Police all the time, but if they weren't doing that, what would have happened? You know, that's the things that you just don't know.
But it's all an illusion. I mean, this whole notion of Team America World Police, that's what's in the movies and on TV. When you
Yeah.
actually look at the history of the American Empire and what they've done, I mean, they've fomented coups in almost every single country on the planet. And the countries that they haven't fomented coups in, it's because they managed to get their people in without having to foment a coup.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's the way you only have to look at the slavish way that tiny little countries like Nauru and places like that just blindly support the US and the United Nations up to a point, obviously.
Yeah.
And I mean, the American empire is a funny one because they've got this outside image of freedom and democracy and Uncle Sam and apple pie and all this kind of stuff. But actually, when you dig below the surface and you look at what the CIA has been doing around the world, and I mean, the reason that we've got the issues with Iran, I mean, Iran in the 1950s had a secular, like forward-looking, so okay, admittedly socialist government, but only socialist in the sense that the government of Iran wanted to use Iranian oil resources to benefit the Iranian people, which is fair enough.
Yeah.
And obviously that was getting in the way of what BP wanted. And so the CIA and MI6 overthrew Mossadegh, put the Shah of Iran in power, who then ruled with an iron fist and had secret police and was generally really unpleasant, taking it to the point where the only place that Iranian people could express themselves was in the mosque. And so you have the rise of the Ayatollahs and Khomeini and people like that. And then you had the Iranian Revolution, which then led to this theocracy that we now see in Iran. And what would have happened if Mossadegh hadn't been overthrown? What would have happened if... And I mean, the number of other countries, I could reel them off. You've got Guatemala, you've got Ecuador. I mean... Yeah, exactly. I mean, even the last...
Look at state of Haiti right now.
Absolutely. And I mean, even Haiti's history is complicated because the problem that the Haitians have got is that they've never been forgiven for rebelling as slaves, because Haiti was the first and only successful slave revolution that ever happened. And ever since those slaves revolted, Haiti has been dumped on and shat on and essentially just abused.
Right. Okay. So to go back to my question then, in real terms, right, other than the method, what's different from what China's trying to do just now with some of these very same countries? What's different from what Russia's doing just now with some of these very same countries? Is it more moral, or are they just actually wrapping it up in a different wrapper but trying to achieve the same thing?
I think it's a different wrapper, but the one thing that characterizes both the Chinese and the Russians is that they've never had overseas colonies. I mean, the Russians tried imperialism for a while and didn't really get anywhere. I mean, you could say the Russians have been imperial in Europe in terms of how they dealt with, I mean, particularly during the Soviet era, but the Soviets tried imperialism, and it didn't work out. And the Russians have never tried. The Russians are not trying to be imperialistic. What the Russians are doing in Ukraine, for example, is protecting Russian speakers.
So what would the Georgians say about that?
That's No, that's a very fair point. But the thing is, we're also talking about great power politics,
Yeah.
and we're talking about threats. I mean, if the Chinese started getting all pally with the Welsh and started giving the Welsh government loads of money and then saying, "Oh, we want to put some bridges in, but we were thinking maybe we could build an airbase here," and it'd be fine. It would just be, I mean. Or you could have Chinese, what we did in Ukraine with the Maidan, you could have the Chinese fomenting issues with Welsh separatists, and then they engineer some sort of color revolution thing in Cardiff, and you get the Welsh decide that they. I mean, I know it's a crazy story, but
it's not that far off the mark, because it's kind of what they're trying in Argentina right now.
Precisely.
You know, they've got a space telescope, right? A space telescope in Argentina, right? That no Argentinians allowed into. It's only run by the Chinese. Okay, it's a fucking satellite listening station, isn't it? Right? It's in the right hemisphere as well. Well, sorry, it's in the right line of longitude to get all the American stuff. So they've got this thing in Argentina that they have an indefinite lease on, I think, and no Argentinians are allowed in it. And then suddenly, what's his name, Malou, decides he wants to visit it, and the Chinese are like, no, that's not part of the deal.
But the thing that I guess the point I'm trying to make is it's no different. But there is a difference in the sense that when was the last time that the Russians actually tried to arrange a coup and overthrow government somewhere since the collapse of the Soviet Union? I'm talking about the modern Russian government. The same with the Chinese. I mean, did the Chinese go around? Okay, they'll go to Africa. And I mean, China's not best popular in places like Zambia because they put loads of infrastructure in. But as you said, they bring in their own workers.
Yeah.
And they don't exactly treat the locals with masses of respect.
I think
but how's that?
Sorry.
No, go on.
Right. I think the Chinese thing is it's a different approach, right? Completely different approach. In that they go in looking to be your pal, right? But ultimately their goal was to be running the show. I think that's the problem with the Chinese. The Chinese don't go and do, like conquering type warfare. Ever since they lost their entire fucking fleet when they tried to take Japan, remember? They just don't do that anymore. So I think that's maybe it's a different approach. Whereas America will send a battle group and project power, China will infiltrate through commerce, the long game.
Yeah, but sure. But if we're talking about them building infrastructure, because if you look at what the Americans do, is it's very extractive. And
do they not help at all though? Do they not build any infrastructure?
Well, they build as much infrastructure as the extraction needs.
Okay.
But they also saddle these countries with all sorts of debt. And I mean, if you look in the case of, there's a story from Ukraine from sort of a few years ago where the Ukrainians needed money and they had two options. This is before the war broke out and stuff. And they could go to the IMF, and the IMF demanded austerity and all of this other stuff. And they could have gone to the Russians, and the Russians said, no, we'll lend you the money and we'll build stuff. And the point is that it seems to me that if it's a choice between two superpowers, let's just take the Russians out of the picture for the moment and talk about the Americans and the Chinese, because they're the two big ones.
Yeah.
If it's a choice between one superpower who basically extracts everything they can, puts very little back into anything, doesn't improve infrastructure. I mean, the Americans aren't even improving their infrastructure at home. Or another superpower that is hell-bent on building stuff and making money and doing commerce and doing trade, and let's build you a port so we can pull stuff out, and let's put some roads in, and let's build some bridges and all this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
then people are going to go with the builder and not the destroyer. I mean,
Yeah. Yeah,
it's
okay.
as simple as that.
I get your
And
point. I get your point. But
I mean,
the
it's a choice of two evils.
well, yeah, as I tried to do, it was just like the 16-year-old girl. Oh, well, I wouldn't say 16. Let's say that's like the 20-year-old girl out on a date, and there's two guys vying for her, and no matter what one she picks, she's going to get fucked. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I'm being quite crude, but
Mm.
it doesn't matter what way you go, the end result's going to be the same to a degree. And
Um,
the
yeah,
thing
but if
about
you have some, I mean, if you get something out of it, if your country develops, because the thing is that the infrastructure that gets
yeah,
built
no,
doesn't just get used for what it's been, what
right,
the extractive industries are.
okay,
And I
but
mean,
what
you
do you
have
have
China
to?
talking about let's build a railway
Yeah,
from
right.
Beijing to
But what
Milan.
does that cost you as a country? That's the thing. What's the it's a bit like is it not a bit like The Godfather when the guy goes, one day I will come to you and I will ask for a favour?
But surely that then comes down to the skill and honesty with which you approach negotiations.
Hmm. Yeah.
Because you do have a choice to let these people in or not.
Well, you do. You do. That's true. That's true.
That's true.
unless you've got the kind of resources that somewhere like Burkina Faso and Niger. I mean, this is as far as those countries go. I mean, what's his name? Traore, I think he's called the president of Burkina Faso. Is it Burkina Faso? I think he is. He's the one with the fist. He fist bumps everybody. He made Sergei Lavrov fist bump. It was fucking hilarious. And he's typical because
And did he do it?
successful.
Did Lavrov do it?
Oh yeah, no, absolutely, because that he's a class diplomat
Yeah,
basically,
well, yeah.
and also yeah, because Traore, I think he's quite young and he has his whole military thing going on, but he's done a bunch of things. I mean, apart from kicking out the French
And the
and
Americans.
saying things like we're going to mine our own gold and we're going to
Hmm.
use it for ourselves.
And the price has gone
Um,
up.
yeah, and he refused to take he refuses to take the president's salary. He's still on the salary of captain of the army.
Hmm. Yeah.
And he cut all the politicians' wages, which we could probably do with here.
Yeah.
Um, and but then you have coup attempts because obviously he's kicked the French out, so the French are really pissed off with him, and the Americans are pissed off with him, and he's also talking about getting together with Niger and Mali. Um, and I mean, personally speaking, I think stuff like that is great because that is the kind of thing that Africa needs, really. Is these people who are going to say to the Chinese, "Okay, you can come in and you can help us and you can build us an airport and build us some roads, but this is the deal that okay, we can't pay you for it, but what we'll do is you can take the income from that particular airport for a set amount of time, like the Panama Canal.
Hmm.
Perfect example where the Americans built it and
Hmm.
they had the rights to run it. And then
Yeah.
after 100 years or whatever, it transferred back to the Panamanians,
Yeah.
by which time they'd been able to put all sorts of stuff in place. So they were able to take over the running of the canal. And to me, if a rich country goes to a poor country and does a deal like that, and it's a fair deal,
Yeah.
then there's nothing wrong with it. And the problem that a lot of European colonialism had, particularly after the fact, is that we just went in and corrupted all of these leaders. And anytime you had, for example, in Zaire, what was he called? He was assassinated by the CIA in the 60s, Lumumba, Patrice Lumumba.
All
And he
right.
was
Yeah.
another one of those, he was like a Mossadegh character who, yeah, he was, I mean, ostensibly,
Gaddafi.
they classed him as, well, yeah, I mean, Gaddafi's another great
Hmm.
example.
Yeah.
Absolute. I mean, the guy was an absolute fruitcake,
Hmm.
but
help these people
I
out.
mean, what he did in Libya was amazing.
Yeah.
And I mean,
No
the
electricity
standard of,
bills, no,
absolutely.
you know, I don't know. I mean, I can't remember exactly, but you know, you got a lot of free shit because it was paid
Well,
for by the oil.
sure. And part of, I mean, this is the problem that Europe has got now, is that one of the things Gaddafi said is, if you get rid of me, Europe is going to be flooded by migrants, because the people would travel from
He
southern
was
Africa
right.
and they would get to Libya and they'd realize what a nice standard of living it was, and they would just stay there
Mhm.
instead of getting on a dinghy and trying to end up in Italy.
He was right.
And well, maybe that was part of the bloody plan, or maybe they were just so
No,
venal and people like, I just.
so why would? Yeah, I know the population is. I mean, the population is going to crash, right? We know that, but it's a way off, right? It's maybe what, turn of the century population crash, right? So why would there be such a need to drive migrants into European countries right now?
And why aren't European countries? They've got a much simpler explanation. If you look at, say, Russia, for example, Russia realizes it needs more people because it's got a lot more country than it's got people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it does,
And
yeah.
so they've got all sorts of, I mean, Russia, they've got tax incentives for women who have more than
Yeah.
3 kids.
Yep.
They pay off mortgages, they pay off loans, they get all sorts of money.
Yep.
It's like, why aren't European countries, instead of saying, oh, we've got a population problem,
Yeah,
we
I
need
know.
to import loads of unskilled people from Africa, why not say we need to encourage our own people to have more kids?
Well, exactly.
But
Why? Why?
on the one hand, they're preaching this eugenics population control thing. And on the other hand, saying we have a population problem and we need to import loads of people who don't have any affinity with this place, don't feel any connection to it. And we're expecting them to come in and suddenly be decent members of society. The whole thing's utterly bonkers.
That is bonkers, and I don't understand it, because anyone with half a brain, and let's face it, you know, these people, regardless of what you think of them, the people that are in positions of power and influence, right? They're not stupid. They know what's going on, and they know that population collapse is a very real problem. Now they may not accept it on the face of it, but underneath it all, they know that's the problem that's going to hit us. And you know, replacing the as you say, why don't they try and encourage us to have more kids?
It's a very good question. I mean, the rabbit holer in me says that they know about the coming calamity and having less people is less of an issue to control. But I'm also not. I'm not entirely sure that people like Hillary Clinton are actually clever enough to do a lot of the things to which they're ascribed. I mean, I do agree that she's completely evil, and the whole
Yeah.
pizza thing and all of that stuff, that's a different thing. But in terms of world events, it's like what you were saying at the start of the show about not being able to control the weather. Human society is just as much a complex system as the
Oh
weather.
yeah.
And so the amount of control that they can exert is actually relatively limited. They might have a complete degree of it, but that's why they have to have all this propaganda. That's why they have to try and censor anyone who disagrees with them. Because if you actually look at it, what they're saying doesn't stand up to scrutiny. And when that happens, the only thing that the authoritarian can do is to start stopping people from talking.
And I'd just like to say hello to Mr. Ben in the chat. Not often,
Hey, Ben.
not often we see Ben gracing us with his presence. Good evening. Yeah, it's it is a quandary. I think actually we're starting. We've been on for nearly 2 hours. Actually, yeah.
I'm surprised there's still anyone in the chat.
Hey, mate, we have 21 viewers, 22 viewers, and we've had them pretty consistently since we started.
Amazing. Well
so
done, guys.
despite our little foibles and our disagreements, because I like to think that you and I, despite the fact that we may think about things differently and on occasion disagree, we are adults,
Oh, absolutely.
And that does happen. It does happen occasionally. But I very much appreciate I very much appreciate our discussions, and I like to be challenged, and there are a few people, and I'm not being boastful, but there are a few people on Twitter who can challenge me, so I think our conversations are very valid, and I like it. I think I'd love you to come back tomorrow night, because I think we need to have fun now after this, because this has been quite a heavy session. And
yeah,
let me
see how it goes with work tomorrow. I'll let you know tomorrow afternoon.
Right, okay, but we all have a need to vent occasionally. And remember, you've been away for 2 weeks. I haven't had a fucking chance. I missed my conversations. So you got to bear that in mind.
Fair enough.
So I value your.
I mean, I don't think I've got anything on tomorrow, so I
you
probably
need to
will
be
back.
here. You need to be here, because I mean, people will ask questions if you're not. They'll think, "Oh, he's fallen out." No, you need to be here. I mean, I value your friendship. We
definitely haven't fallen out.
I value your thought processes, because they are so different, right? Because you know what? If I wanted to live in an echo chamber, I wouldn't speak to you. I wouldn't speak to Ben and things like that, because you need people to challenge you at every opportunity. Because if you're not challenged, then how can you grow? It's like a tennis player. If you only play people that are worse than you, how can you ever hope to get better? And this is what I endeavour to do. Yeah. Yeah, so
well, there's a wonderful English proverb that I always go back to, which is that smooth seas do not a good sailor make.
Indeed. Well, yes, actually, that's quite apt.
And the feeling is mutual. I mean, I got a bit arsey earlier, but I mean, fundamentally, I respect you, and just you need to let me get a word in bloody.
I forgive you. Hey, look, mate. If you've got a point to say, just fucking talk over me, because I'll shut up. I will shut up. Generally when men talk over one another, one of them shuts up, right? Because we're not women. If we were women, we'd keep talking at the same. And I'm not being misogynist, but just observe this. If you go to like a mixed gathering and a woman starts talking, all the guys will be quiet and listen to her, right? And then a guy will start talking, and if she'll butt in, all the guys will stop talking and listen to her, right? But if you get another woman in there and they start talking to each other, they never shut up. They just talk at each other all the time. Women can do that two-way conversation. Guys can't. Guys only do one-on-one. I'll speak, you'll reply. You'll speak, I'll reply. That's what guys do. And women can't figure that out. They really can't. But it's true. That you know that, Ed. You must have seen that.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But this is why the whole notion that men can become women and women can become men is just absurd. Because fundamentally it's not just. There are differences in bone structure, there's differences in hormones, and there's also differences in how our brains work.
Yeah.
And it is. Two women can seemingly both talk at the same time and still actually manage to have a conversation.
They do.
Whereas if two guys tried to do that, they'd end up punching each other.
They would. Guys do not talk at each other like women can. Women can do it, men can't. We are single taskers. And, there's no shame in that, because when we focus on that single task, we focus on it. unless you ask us to look for something in the fridge, because that's just something that men can't do. But yeah, men are from Mars and women are from Venus, and never a truer word was said, and never a truer book was actually written, to be fair.
This is very true.
Yeah.
Yes, I agree with that.
Oh, right.
I think that's probably a good place to wind things up too.
I think we've had a good night, to be fair.
Yeah, it's been fun.
Yeah, no,
kind of.
I think we've had a good night. I think it's been helpful. It's been therapeutic for me. I don't know about you.
It's been open and frank. Well, yeah, no, it is, and open and frank. It's the point that we're making about people having to be able to have disagreements and for it to be okay, and to express that and say what's bugging you and kind of deal with it and move on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you know what? That's what people need to be able to do, and unfortunately, that's a position that countries aren't in. They won't fucking turn around and say, "Yeah, okay, well, maybe I was a bit wrong," and I'm sorry.
Well,
they won't do that.
It's one of the reasons I did international relations at university, because I've always found it fascinating, because countries interact with each other in a very different way from how people interact with each other.
Yeah.
And it's and I mean, those interactions impact or have the potential to impact all of us in a massive way. But they don't. You have to understand the rules that they follow. And I mean, for anyone interested, the first person to go to is Clausewitz, and the second person to go to is what was his German diplomat? Name escapes me.
German diplomat.
Began with a B. Oh.
No, I'm coming up blank. Sorry.
Net to readers would know if he's still on there. Oh God, it's bugging me now. What was his name? Anyway, famous German diplomat, made loads of interesting comments about Russians. Bismarck, that's the one.
Bismarck. How could you forget Bismarck? Oh my God.
Well, I knew. It's just when you have the name on the tip of your tongue and you just can't.
I know.
Yeah, Bismarck.
Yep. Okay.
Clausewitz and Bismarck were the places to go to understand countries.
Excellent. I will do that. Right. Thank you very much. And thank you, one and all, for attending this little show that we do. Remember, you can support us at Ko-fi.com/Chasing Dissent or Ko-fi.com/Sergeant Grumpy, SGT Grumpy, all one word. And we'll be back tomorrow night, won't we, Ed? We will.
Yes.
Yes, we will.
I will do my best. Unless something terrible happens at work, I will be back.
And remember, it's been great for you.
That's all we've got time for this evening, so it's good night from me.
And it's good night from him. Good night.
Good night.
Good night, everyone.
Good night, Mama. Good night, Daddy.
Stop playing with my bust!
Good night, everybody.
Good night, children. Good night, Daddy.
You're a what?
A pianist!
Mwah! Good night, everybody.
You have been a delightful audience to talk. Good night. Thank you.
Oh, my bottom hurts. Good night, everybody.
Good night, Elizabeth.
Good night, John Boy. Good night, Jim Bob.
Oh, I did love that hamster so. I took it into bed with me every night, you know.
Good night, everybody.
I think, ladies and gentlemen, I think I have to go now. I've been standing here for a very long time. I think the end of the show must have come and gone.
There you go. That's our solar system.
You forgot Uranus.
Good night, everybody.
Thank you for listening. You've been very nice to work.
Good night, Jim Bob.
Good night, Jim Bob.